Welcome to In Focus. I'm Anthony Moreno. The Diocese of Las Cruces has been asked by the Annunciation House of El Paso at the request of Immigration Customs Enforcement of the federal government to help with refugees who are in transition from federal custody to family life here in the U.S. Here to tell us more about Project Oaktree with the Diocese of Las Cruces is Deacon David McNeill, Jr. Thank you so much for being with us, Deacon.
Glad to be with you.
Now, if you could start off by telling us a little bit about the history of Project Oaktree.
Well, the name Project Oaktree comes from the biblical story in Genesis where God and two angels are supposed to have appeared. I've forgotten the prophet's name at this point, but he took them in, put them under a tree in the shade, fed them, and offered them housing, but they went on their way. So this is kind of the same issue. We got a call from Bishop Seitz, Bishop Cantu of the Diocese of Las Cruces received a phone call from Bishop Seitz of El Paso saying that Annunciation House, which is an organization that houses refugees on a pretty regular basis, and about two and a half years ago there was a large surge and they were running out of places, and so they asked if we could help. So we put together this program, we called it Project Oaktree, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, would transfer refugee families to us for housing and to help them make arrangements to get to whatever family members they already had in the United States legally. All of them have family members in the U.S. And so we would house them then at Finley Hall, which is part of the campus of the Immaculate Heart of Mary Cathedral. We had cots for them, meals, showers. We'd give them new clothing because many of them, the only clothes they have are what they wore up. And in those days, all of them were coming from Central America. And it was a long, arduous trip. I had one lady tell me that she hadn't seen the inside of a shower or a bathtub for 28 days.
Wow.
So, and they all had children with them. So these were people that were in pretty tough straits. They were all fleeing violence, gang violence, drug cartels, those kinds of things. And that lasted for about 6 weeks until the federal government decided it would move all of these folks into centers. The first one was in Artesia, and it was pretty tough place for those folks to be.
Was it more like a detention center?
It basically was. High wire, they had Border Patrol guards. The food they served them was not what they're used to eating. Many of them would just throw away the food because they couldn't take it. And they were waiting for hearings on their status, on their claim for asylum.
Just to stop you real quick,
okay.
Just to make a clarification, I mean, I'm sure there are many questions that folks have about the project, and this project is something that is simply facilitated by the diocese. It's not sponsored by the diocese.
Well, we facilitate the transportation of these folks. Once they are cleared by ICE, they have to be vetted first, make sure they don't have a criminal history. They make their claim for asylum with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and then they're given a date at which they will appear at a hearing. And during the time between their receipt and processing and that hearing, they stay with a family member who's already legally in the United States. And our function is to help them get that transportation to be with their family, to take care of them for the 24 to 48 hours that they're waiting for transportation.
Also, another thing I think it's important for our audience to understand is that these are refugees that are here legally in the United States.
That's correct. Somebody once asked me, well, how do they get here? Well, the answer is you can't mail a letter and say, I want refugee status. You have to come to that country. So when they cross the border, they turn themselves in. And then they're processed, and as I say, they're vetted. Once their claim is shown to be sufficient to warrant a hearing, that's when ICE will transport them up to us or to Annunciation House in El Paso.
Now, you had mentioned before when this program first began and the diocese was involved, is the refugees were in a center, like a detention center.
Right. Well, they would be held in Customs and Border Patrol detention centers, which were in deplorable shape. They would be sleeping on concrete floors with no covers or blankets. Sometimes they'd get a blanket or so.
And you saw this? You visited
I've
these
seen
facilities?
The pictures of those. I did visit the facility in Artesia after they stopped sending them to us, and it was very, very upsetting. At any rate, we got a call again last September, October, that they wanted to start this program up again as we had done it before. This time, instead of housing them in one facility until they could get transportation, we switched the program so we have what we call host families that will take them into their homes and assist them in getting transportation. And that works by contacting the host family that they're going to be living with until they have their hearing. And so we call that family, we make arrangements for them to pay for the transportation. Usually they either send us a ticket or a credit card number. And then during that time, the host family will house them, feed them, get them clothing. We have several cooperating agencies like the Salvation Army will give them clothing if they need it. If they need medical care, very few of them do, but the common issue there is respiratory illness and dehydration from the trip up from Central America. And so they can get that for free, and then once the arrangements for transportation have been made, the host family here will transport them either to the bus station or to the airport in El Paso and make sure they get on the plane so that they're taken care of.
So how's the response been from the community here in Las Cruces in regards to hosting refugees?
This community is very generous. They have contributed. In fact, when we first started this a couple of years ago, we had more clothing than we could actually give away. We now have about 12 host families. Not all of them come from the Catholic churches. In fact, we have at least one volunteer from Temple Bethel. Other churches also offer volunteers. So right now we have 12 host families. That number is slowly growing. And the turnaround time for these folks, once they get into our places, is about 24 hours. Some take up to 48, depending on how fast that host, the family that they belong to, can get us the transportation arrangements.
So do you have any idea of how many people this program has helped?
In this, 2 years ago, it was about 180 in the 6 weeks. Now,
in 6 weeks,
yeah,
180
about
people.
Right.
Okay.
And that's families and or parents and children. In those days, most of the parents were women, or there might be an aunt or a grandmother, and they'd have anywhere from 1 to 5 children with them. Now we're finding that as of this morning, we've taken care of 122 families, which is composed of 283 people. So the host families, as I say, it's a short stay. So usually we receive the refugees sometime on Tuesday, and then they're usually gone on the airplane or on the bus by Thursday.
Now, I imagine there's a lot of rules that are in place for the families. I mean,
right.
in regards to keeping in contact and things like that.
Yeah, all of the host families have to register with us and go through training. They also have to have a criminal background check for anybody over the age of 18, and they have to take a course on what we call safe environment, which means how you don't pick on the kids or any of those kinds of things. The families are responsible for their own children. They have to be with them all the time. And so the other rules are we don't allow photographs, we don't allow records of names and so on, because most of the people coming up here are seeking asylum from gang violence or from drug cartels. And they have family back in their home country, so if those names get out, then those folks are in danger. So we're pretty tight on those kinds of things. Other than that, it's basically just welcoming the refugees into the home, providing them with food, companionship, and so on. So one of the things that's very helpful for our host families is that they speak Spanish. But that's not required, and sometimes it's not even necessary. We have a couple of refugees who have spoken English, and we also have some that don't speak Spanish either. They speak their native tongue in whatever tribe they were from in their home country, and they don't speak Spanish or English, and so then you resort to sign language.
I see. Interesting. I imagine there's a lot of different types of communication going on to really facilitate this whole process. We have less than a minute left, just probably about 30 seconds, but I'm just curious, in your opinion, do you feel that refugees bring value to the United States?
I do. I've met a number of them, spoken to them. They are all people who need help. I mean, their status in their own countries is really deplorable. And I think they are anxious to come to this country and do good. They want to get jobs, they want to work. They're not looking for free handouts, but they are trying to get away from some pretty deplorable situations.
see. Well, Deacon McNeill, thank you so much for joining us and
Thank
sharing
you.
with us about Project Oaktree.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
And we want to thank you for joining us for In Focus. I'm Anthony Moreno.